'Twas the night before monster, and all through the world not a creature was stirring, not a banner unfurled, all except for the great enchanter Nagash, who strode across the land as quick as a flash. His bony face did smile, and his eyes did seek to find those that he thought stubborn or weak. He destroyed all he saw and burnt it to death, and then rose it again under his mighty breath. For now the desolate world that we see is nothing more than a far distant memory. For the truth is, as should always be told, we like Age of Sigmar, but we miss the old world. Or, in other words, welcome to this festiveness.
A round of applause, I think. That was great. Did you come up with that off the top of your head?
Yes, because
Adam?
I didn't get the chance to write anything down.
I thought you did. That, for off the cuff, that was fantastic. Yeah, for spontaneous work. Well done. Yeah. My
original plan was actually going to be to do a little story about a guy called Van Horse.
Uh-huh.
So it would be it was the night before Mondstadt, and all through the house not a creature was stirring, except for Van House. I'm trying to remember how I was planning it. For you see, Van House was undead, and had been since.
I don't think it could have been better. That was really, really good. I mean, very cool indeed. I enjoyed that a lot, and it kind of, it puts me in mind of a thread that's been going on the Fluffenhammer Facebook page, which is talking about is there kind of like a Christmas equivalent celebration in the cults of the old world?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm sure that who was the winter god? Who was the winter? Yeah, I'm sure Ulrich probably had loads of ceremonies around this time.
There's actually quite a lot, but none of them are a direct one-to-one for Christmas.
For Christmas, yeah. That's odd, isn't it? You'd have thought there'd be one. You'd have thought that one of the races would have something a little like Christmas. Maybe the orcs or the goblins or something. I can sort of see them getting in on that.
Merry Christmas. Yeah, I quite like the idea. Yeah, Mondstadt seems to be the closest one. Mondstadt is the height of Ulrich's time in the old world. So it's the hungry world. The hungry wolves are all going around killing the livestock, and all the humans are inside shivering. It's cold. It's dark. But all the bonfires get lit. Gifts are given, and it's trying to sort of reignite life into winter. So
very much like like Christmas here in the Midlands, really.
Yeah, pretty much actually, yes.
Very like Christmas here in the Midlands. Yeah, I mean, I do imagine that the Norsemen, when there were Norsemen, when there was a north of the old world, which there isn't anymore, I imagine they had lots of ceremonies around this time, but I don't think many of them would have been equivalent to Christmas somehow.
No, it'd be more like giving your enemies the head of your father, that type of thing.
Exactly, sort of like burying your firstborn and letting them rot in an offering up to Grandfather Nurgle or something like that. Something to that effect.
I mean, the only other one that comes close is the Mithabist, which is the fall equinox, known as Less Growth, which I think is a really cool name. I was thinking about using that one. It's basically it's the time of Tal and Ria, if you really want to get back into the old world.
I was going to say, this is getting well back into the old world, isn't it?
So
am I right in thinking, I may be wrong in this, but part of the old world still does exist, doesn't it?
The core of the old world does, yes.
Yeah, it's sailing through the heavens, isn't it? It's sort of like a fireball or like a ball of warp-saturated nonsense.
It's what Sigmar built his Great Big Fortress on.
Right. So like the essentially the equivalent of the Kingdom of Heaven, which is Sigmar's realm, where the Stormcast Eternals are born and reborn and reforged and whatnot, is still technically the old world, or it has the old world as its foundations.
Yeah, the very core, the molten ball at the center of the world.
That's interesting, because, that does leave space for there to be characters returning from the old world that were thought dead or lost.
I think so. I mean, the interesting thing about Azir is that they've never come out and actually said it.
Yeah.
But in a couple of the books, there's this idea that it holds the memory of the old world.
Yeah,
All the sort of the history of it is just locked within these bits of molten metal core. And Sigmar, when he sort of flew around and was like, "Oh God, what did I do?" And then he met the dragon,
yes.
whose name I can't remember actually.
Oh yeah, the Star Dragon. Yeah, I remember that. I remember that bit of the fluff.
And the Star Dragon.
That was when it was getting like proper prog rock, wasn't it? It really was. It was going proper sort of acid trip nonsense.
That's when it went full blown Marillion. Yeah.
Yeah, it was complete Roger Dean stuff, wasn't it, at that point? Which I must say I really like.
Yeah, I was quite enjoying it. And then it kind of kicked into gear with the Iron Jaws, and that's the point where I went, okay, I'm in.
Yeah. I can't remember what it was for me. It was one of the. It was when they started talking about how like Nagash had become not just the Lord of the Undead, but was basically the god of all death now.
Yes, yeah.
So he's become elemental, as a lot of the characters from the old world have become, who have absorbed the one of the winds of magic. They've become divinities at this point.
Yes.
And I love that. And of course it's pertinent, of course, because he's on his way back, isn't he?
He is. Oh, yes, we're going to talk about that in a bit. Right, Philip. So, what we've got tonight? Well, hang on. No, today is the morning.
Not yet.
Yeah. What we're going to do is we're going to carry on with our freeform style of show.
Excellent.
There's a couple of things that I really want to get out there. The first thing is, if you are a member of the Fluffenhammer, then you will notice that the Fluffies are now open, which is going to be our award show for the first show that we do in 2018. So all those categories are open. If you're listening to this on YouTube, check downstairs, check below in the comment section, because I will be putting all of the categories up in there as well. So you guys can vote, and we'll see what we get. I think I can see what a few of them are going to be as winners already.
There does seem to be a certain pattern for some of them.
Yes.
Inevitably so, I would say, because there's been a certain game system that has dominated this last year. Fair enough.
Yes.
It's absolutely fair enough. Given the time and attention that's been given to it, it's fair enough.
And I didn't actually expect to see Chainsaw Warrior make a reappearance.
I don't think anybody expected that.
Nobody expects the Chainsaw Warrior.
I imagine most people won't even know what that is.
No. Look, actually, I think it came back out on iPad not long back, thinking about it.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, there is an IP I never thought I'd ever see again.
No, it's... I'll have to check it out to make sure I'm not lying. Yeah. But to kick everything off this morning, what we're going to do is we're going to answer a very simple question. And that very simple question, and I will throw it to you first, George.
Okie dokie.
Right now, as the cold winds blow... Oh, it's not really, is it? As the mediocre winds blow in
It's exactly that. It's actually rather warm here.
Yeah, it's 9 degrees here.
Yeah, it's distressing. I don't like it at all. I want my snow and ice and frost back, please.
Yeah, I want the mist. I want the frost. I'm annoyed. And I know I'm going off on a tangent here.
I feel cheated of my winter, which I love. I love the autumn and winter seasons, and I love I want the biting colds. I want to go outside and feel it biting into my fingers. I don't want to go outside and have to think, oh, have I put too many layers on?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's December. You automatically go, right, so jumper, coat, hat, gloves. And when you leave the house 3 minutes later, you're like, I'm sweltering.
I am sweating like a pig.
Yeah.
Basically. Like a Slanesh worshipper in a harem.
Would that be sweaty? Would that be more
or
grease?
Or a farmyard, or wherever the Slanesh worshipper happens to find themselves, really.
Like a Slanesh warrior in an ice cream shop.
in anywhere,
Yeah,
basically, because that's the thing about Slaanesh. They can find anything arousing or pleasurable. So, like a Slaanesh worshipper in an upholstery store.
Oh, I do love a Chesterfield. What I was going to say was every morning on Christmas morning, and I've done it for about 6-7 years now, is get up early, make sure everything's done, all the presents are ready, maybe, get the mulled cider started off.
Oh.
And then I'll go for a nice little walk. And this is about 8 o'clock in the morning. I'll just go for a little walk, maybe for 20 minutes or so, not very long. And I love it because you do not see another human being.
It's nice, isn't it? Yeah, that is lovely.
And last year there was just mist everywhere. There was ice on the ground. I did not hear or see another human being for the entire half an hour I was out walking. And it was amazing. It almost felt like Silent Hill. It was... Oh.
That's exactly what we've got here at the moment. Yeah. With the early morning fog and everything, heralding the warmth to come. It's very like that sort of sound deadening fog that shrouds everything. You're just waiting for the hiss of radio static and for the air raid sirens to start.
Imagine if they did.
Oh, I'd be so happy.
The apocalypse at last.
I'd be so happy. Well, the thing is, a Silent Hill style apocalypse sounds fine to me.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds absolutely fine. Silent Hill just reflects back at you what you bring to it. So
God.
I'm not that concerned about that, to be honest. I kind of live that world anyway, so it's fine.
I would love to know what Silent Hill would bring to me.
I know. That's the appeal of it, isn't it? That is the appeal of that world. What would it show you?
Timmy Mallet in a world of just absolute mediocrity.
Oh God, that would be horrendous. Now that I would be genuinely distressed and disturbed by.
It would be nothing but, have you done your tax returns? No, go away.
No, thank you.
Yeah, the Pyramid Head's just sitting there in a suit. But
anyway.
So moving on. The question I have for you, sir, is what have you been attending to in the hobby to see out the year? What have you been building? What have you been reading? What have you been doing?
Man, I've been actually, despite being exceptionally busy with one thing or another, I've actually been really immersed in these last couple of months. I've been doing loads of stuff. I've had sitting on my desk upstairs for the longest time the core of my Thousand Suns warband, the Shattered Suns. But they've because I like to convert my miniatures. I like that. I always take a lot of time before I start putting my miniatures together to think about what they're going to be. So how they're going to look and what particular aesthetic they're going to have that removes them from what people are used to. I really like to give people something a little bit different, and that's tricky with the Thousand Suns. That's kind of tricky because their aesthetic it's informed by their background. So you can't deviate enormously from it without undoing them as Thousand Suns, without making them something completely different. So I've come up with this concept of an army of Thousand Suns called the Shattered Suns, who were magically insulated against the rubric of Ahriman when it was cast. Their sorcerers foresaw its coming and foresaw what it would do to their brethren. So in order to protect them, they kind of shunted them out of reality, like one step out of existing reality, which they thought was going to be temporary. However, the rubric was much more complex and much more intent than they imagined, and it still affected them. But rather than reducing them to dust within their armor, what it did was exaggerated what the Shattered Sun sorcerers have done to them. So it scattered them across time and probability. So they are now not coherent beings. They're more like they flicker and transform. They're like specters on the battlefield, and they're surrounded by the potential ghosts of themselves. So what I've done is essentially come up with this notion of Thousand Suns that have two models per base. So you've got the Shattered Sun's Thousand Sun, and then a completely different model sharing the base with them that's one of their potentials. So the potential is going to be coloured like, you know how the ghosts are usually coloured in an undead army. So they're all spectral and whatnot. So that's what I've been working on primarily. And alongside them, I've got a coven of the sorcerers who are responsible for this, who are, I've just gone to town on them because I wanted them to be some almost unrecognizable as Marines. I wanted them to be so mutated, so transformed, that it's almost difficult to recognize them for what they are. So I've gone to town on them. I need a few more because I want a coven of 9, obviously. Of course. And alongside them, there's also a unit of Scarab Occult Terminators. And what I've done with them is they were the ones responsible for traveling throughout time and reality, trying to find the scattered remnants of their brothers so that they could bring all the potentials back together and reform them. So what I've done with them is I've sort of borrowed a little bit of background from Bloodborne. There's a college in the world of Bloodborne in Yharnam that seeks a kind of transcendence by grafting various eyes to their person, sort of magically and surgically grafting eyes all about their person. So what I've done is adapted that into the 40k universe. So these Scarab Occult Terminators, in order to see into the various potentials where their brethren have been scattered, they've been hunting down divinatory demons, so any demon that can sort of see into the future or see into potentials, like Lords of Change and certain pink horrors. They've been hunting them down and ripping out their eyes and grafting it to their own bodies. So they're going to have sort of like demonic eyes grafted all over them. So that's what I've been working on.
That's awesome.
It's a load of fun. I mean, that's what I like about the hobby more than anything. When I see an armor, you know, if you go onto like the Bolter and Chainsword or Daka Daka or Warseer, and you see these army projects where people have gone to town, they've just made them like principal means of self-expression. I get so inspired by that. If I ever feel like I'm waxing or you know, I don't have any energy for the hobby, if I just go on to the work in progress forums and look at what people are doing, that usually does it for me. That will just reinvigorate and re-inspire me. So that's what I'm trying to do with these guys. I really want them to tell a story. So when people see them on the battlefield, they're not just different. You can sort of tell what's going on by looking at them. They have a kind of ethos or feeling about them. So that's what I've been doing. In terms of reading, I'm about halfway through the second book in the Fabius Bile series.
Fabulous Bill's Great Adventures. Exactly,
Fabulous Bill's Great Adventures. Yes, absolutely that. The first one, Primogenitor, I really enjoyed. I thought it's a fun book. It's a really fun book. It's not as ambitious as some of the ones, like the ones written by Aaron Dembski-Bowden, for example, like the Talon of Horus and Black Legion, which, I mean, those books are so ambitious, and they really try to invert a lot of what you expect about the 40k universe and its principal villains. This one doesn't really do that. It just goes for the gusto. It really wants to revel in the darkness and the body horror and all of that stuff, the exaggerated, ridiculous malevolence of it all. And it does it really beautifully. Fabius is a great character. He's the kind of villain that you just like to be in the presence of, because he's quite clever and quite witty and quite charming, and is actually really removed from it all in a way that some of the more faithful or fanatical chaos characters aren't. He's not like, say, Ahriman, who is obsessed with his own tragedy and with the unfairness of it all. He's not like Khan, who is just a nutter, who is actually just completely lost. And he's not like Abaddon, who has a crusade to wage. He has this wry sense of humor about it all, about like the 10,000 years that he spent in damnation and how degenerate the legions have become around him. And he doesn't like any of them. That's the most interesting thing about him. He hates them all. He actually considers himself to be above all of them, including the demon Primarchs. He's got no time for them. Absolutely no time for them at all. And the game he's playing is arguably the most far-flung, because he is looking forward to a time when there are no gods, when humanity is completely disconnected from the warp and is not prey to it anymore. So he's actually he's trying to create this new condition of humanity, these new men that he's trying to perfect through various forms of gene craft and whatnot. It's really fascinating.
Say new men, is it new men as in the word new and then men, or is it N-U-M-E-N?
No, it's N-E-W-M-E-N.
Okay.
So new men. He's trying to create a new species of humanity that is as adept, as powerful, as physically capable as, say, a space marine, but is not prone to the same flaws.
Yep.
So he's not fanatical, is not obsessive, is not a zealot, can think for themselves, can operate on their own. And there are actually examples of these characters that he's created, and it's really interesting. His relationship with them is absolutely fascinating, because they regard him as a kind of father figure, almost as the Space Marines regard their Primarchs. But they are not so dedicated to him that they would be crippled by his death.
Yeah.
In point of fact, he is deliberately conditioning them so that they can operate independently from him. That's kind of the point, you know. He's almost like the ultimate libertarian in a way. He's trying to create a situation where humanity is not beholden to anyone or anything, where it can survive on its own in any situation. It's really quite interesting. It's actually quite fascinating. And he believes that is the only thing to do. That's the only option that humanity has at this point to save it from the cycles of history, from the flaws of empires, from the predations of gods and of demigods and divinities. So his perspectives are really far flung. He sees the universe with the eyes of an immortal.
Yeah, it's I'm trying to think of his name. Do you remember Vampire Hunter D?
I do remember Vampire Hunter D.
Do you remember
Yes,
Count Magnus Lee and his entire purpose?
I do, yes.
And that's what I'm being reminded of here. It's the, what a wonderful evening. I haven't been bored once in the last few hours.
Exactly that, yes.
Because that's how an immortal would see the world. It becomes a very different place when you cannot die.
Yeah, well, it's ironic as well, because although he has existed for centuries and will exist for centuries more, he is actually looking to a point where he is no more. Unlike many of the other characters within the Chaos pantheon, he is acutely aware of his own mortality. He knows that he's been given a degree of longevity by his presence within the Eye, but he is dying. Yeah. He is very, very, very slowly dying, and isn't that concerned. He's not that bothered about his own death so much. He doesn't want to live forever. He just wants his work to live on forever. And he regards himself as sort of like the father of a new race. So not only of a new race, but a new status for the universe.
I've realised, of course, that some people out there are probably wondering why I got hung up over the spelling of new men.
Yeah.
If you go back to the Jacques Draco books, the Inquisitor series, I think it got re-released as the Inquisition War.
It did at one point.
Yeah. The entire point of that was the Harlequins and a couple of human traitors were trying to make the new men. And the new men were going to be the people who were disconnected from the Emperor and from the Chaos Gods. They were psychically, what would be the word?
They're they're null, aren't they? I mean, they're disconnected. Their power or their whatever capacities they evince is not reliant upon the warp.
Exactly. So I found that really interesting. It's like, oh, hang on.
Well, I do think there are elements of that have been passed into Fabius Bile's creations and into his background, definitely. Definitely. But it's fascinating. I mean, what I really like is that he surrounded himself with this coterie of outcast apothecaries from the other legions.
Right.
And they simultaneously revere and absolutely loathe him. It's really fascinating. None of them like him. But at the same time, they acknowledge that his knowledge and genecraft is supreme. None of them can do what he can do.
He is the necessity, the one that has to exist. But
there's
nobody
also
quite
the
likes
fact
the fact that he does.
He's a very good politician as well. I mean, almost all of them are outcasts from their original legions and are being hunted as a result. So they have no choice but to throw in with him because he offers protection.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the only one that isn't like that is a word bearer by the name of Sakara. And Sakara was sent by the Dark Council to assassinate him originally because the Dark Council hate him. They regard him as like a heretic. But Fabius caught him and genetically grafted all of these basically genetic biological time bombs into his system. So if Fabius dies, Sakara dies in the most imaginably painful way you could. So Sakara has no choice but to follow him, which I really like.
Yeah, I like that. That's
I
very
like
cool.
that too. I think that's really cool. And the needling between them is brilliant. I mean, they've got this real hate relationship where Fabius finds Sakara quite amusing. He finds him quite quaint, whereas Sakara just hates Fabius. Just because it's unfathomable how much he hates Fabius.
He just absolutely despises him for what he's done and everything he stands for. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, it's brilliant. The fact that he's been made beholden to a heretic is the worst thing imaginable for him.
I like that.
I love it. I mean, it's a good series of books, actually. I mean, they're not the best written of the Black Library books, not by any stretch of the imagination, but they are lots of fun. They've got a lot of gusto behind them, and they really relish the body horror elements of chaos, which I like a lot.
Yeah, nice and pulpy and a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when Fabius is interacting with his old legion, with the Emperor's children, who by this point are just they are so far removed from what they once were. I mean, they are deep within the thrall of Slanesh worship, and so are one of the most physically and mentally distorted legions out there. And his interactions with them are fascinating because he loathes them. He hates them. I mean, he hates them powerfully. But yes, I mean, these books are good. I mean, the guy who wrote them, who is, it's Anthony Reynolds, I think, not Josh Reynolds. Josh Reynolds wrote the Dark Council books, the Word Bearers books, which are not very good. Anthony Reynolds, he wrote the Fabius books and also the recent Khan book.
Now, I've heard good things about the Khan book.
It's really good. It's really good. It's sort of set just after the Scouring. So the World Eaters have just fled into the Eye of Terror and just before the Scalathrax campaign. Yeah. And they're trying... Khan is essentially dead because he was killed before the Gates of Terror, if you remember in his background. He was found on like a pile of mangled corpses in front of the Gates of Terror and taken away. He's still alive, sort of, but only barely. You know, he's sort of like brain dead. He's being kept alive without much hope of him ever being resurrected. But the World Eaters, the ones that are still halfway sane, they want him back. They want him back because Khan was one of the very few. He was the most disciplined. He was the most sane of the World Eaters at one time. Yep. He was the one that curbed the excesses of Angron. He could actually calm Angron down. He was one of the very few who could. So they want him back because the Legion is falling apart. It's just dissolving into these internecine wars, you know, these little cults of Khorne. And they need him to bring it back. So that's what the book is about. It's about them doing everything in their power to bring him back. And they do succeed towards the end. Unfortunately, the Khan that comes back is Khan the Betrayer. It's the Khan the Betrayer we know,
Right.
who is the most lunatic of the World Eaters, the one who ultimately breaks them apart. And I mean, one of the first things he does when they land on Scalathrax, there is like, there's this very uncomfortable parley between the Emperor's children and the World Eaters before the fighting breaks out. And the reason the fighting breaks out is because Khan shoots Fulgrim in the face with a plasma pistol. Yeah. It was supposed to be a diplomatic mission.
That sounds to me as diplomatic as Khorne should be.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's how the fighting starts. And of course, I mean, Fulgrim is fine with this. At this point, he's quite happy to be shot in the face with anything, quite frankly.
Experience.
Absolutely, and that's how it all kicks off. That's how it ends. I would love it if you wrote another one which described the war on Scalathrax, because it's always been sort of glossed over, despite being a really important point for both the legions. It's always kind of just it's part of the Codex background, you know. So you know that they fought a war over the demon world of Scalathrax, and the way Scalathrax worked was that it had like blazing, blistering desert-like days and then frozen Arctic nights.
Yep.
And when the night came, anything that was out of cover would freeze to death, even Space Marines. And the World Eaters, some of the more sane ones, seek shelter. And Khan curses them for that, because they're not doing what they're supposed to do. They are not seeking the skulls of the enemy. So he takes up a flamer from one of his brothers and then essentially starts torching his own brothers and the Emperor's children at the same time. And at that point, the World Eaters just break apart. They become these vying war bands that are scattered throughout the Eye of Terror. It would be wonderful to see the details of that. I would love to see how Khan goes from just degenerates over the course of that war. Interestingly, also, Fulgrim already knows what he's going to do. There's a great dialogue between him and Fulgrim where Fulgrim calls him the betrayer beforehand. He slithers right up to him, looks him in the eye and tells him that he knows what he's going to do and that it's going to be soon, and basically invites it.
I see. That's the type of thing that I really enjoy. That sort of the insidious nature of Fulgrim.
It's interesting, isn't it? A lot of the Demon Primarchs do that. A lot of them do it. There's loads. I mean, if you read Aurelian or Betrayer, that focuses a lot on Lorgar. Lorgar knows pretty much everything that's going to happen, everything that we know, everything the reader knows before it happens. He's foreseen it. So he knows what's going to happen at Terra. He knows what's going to happen to the traitor legions. He talks about it with Magnus. He taunts Magnus at one point. Magnus is kind of psychically projecting to him across the void. And Lorgar is taunting him, saying, "Oh, you think you haven't made a choice? You've already made it. I know what you're going to do. I know what's going to happen to your legion." And he says something like to him, it's really kind of on the nose. He says to him something like, "By the way, how is Ahriman?" And it's like, where did that come from? There's no reason for him to say it. There's no reason for him to say it apart from the context that the reader knows that Ahriman is going to destroy that legion. That he has an especial place in Tzeentch's plans. So Lorgar knows this.
That's really cool.
It is cool, isn't it?
Yeah,
he also, he knows what's going to happen to Angron. He knows what's going to happen to Mortarion. It's fascinating.
It's almost like it's absorbing the reader's knowledge. It's making sure that the reader knows more than the characters in order to make everything foreshadow in this very unsettling manner.
Well, what it basically states outright is that Lorgar is playing a very, 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 very long war indeed. As in, right up to the present day. Since the early days of the Horus Heresy, he's been planning for the present day with the Cicatrix Maledictum and the spilling through of the traitor legions into real space and the return of Magnus and Mortarion. He's been planning it all. all of it. He's foreseen all of it. So, the real villain of the 40k universe, the one that orchestrates everything, is Lorgar.
You would never have thought that, would you?
Not really, no. I mean, he's never been the most prominent of the traitor Primarchs, not up until recently. But I imagine when he comes back, and I do think, having read the hints in the Chaos Space Marine Codex, it's a matter of when.
Yeah.
Rather than if. I think that's going to be amazing. I think they're going to use that as an excuse to really shunt the 40k universe on again.
That would be really good. It'd be cool for it to be Lorgar that does it rather than one of the big names.
Like Abaddon or whatever. Yeah, it would. I mean, Abaddon's done his big thing with the Cicatrix Maledictum and the Fall of Cadia. That's a very, very big victory for Abaddon. And I think now maybe the focus should shift a little bit. Have Abaddon still around, waging his war, trying to get to Terra and all that kind of stuff. But maybe refocus on the traitor Primarchs now.
Yeah.
Which is what they've been doing, to be fair. I mean, there's a big focus being paid to Magnus and Mortarion. And my guess is the next one will be Angron.
I think that you're probably quite correct there. The interesting thing that seems to be happening here is that the Primarchs, I think, are going to be taking over from characters like Angron. I'm trying not to use the term special characters, but you know what I mean. The personalities of the 40k universe. That we're going to start seeing the Primarchs coming back, and they're going to take over all these little sections. I mean, when's the last time you heard about Marinus Calgar?
Yeah, it's a fair point. He's been relegated to almost like a regency role, hasn't he? I mean, there is some stuff in the Space Marine Codex about his relationship to Guilliman, which is what you'd expect it to be. Obviously, I mean, Guilliman is his god. Guilliman is his icon. Yeah. So he very happily gives up the command of the Ultramarines to Guilliman. I think that's absolutely the case. But what is really interesting is thus far the dynamics of the traitor Primarchs to their special character equivalents. So Typhus to Mortarion, for example, and Ahriman to Magnus is way more interesting and dynamic than the relationships of the loyalist special characters to their Primarchs. Yeah. So there's no tension between Marneus and Guilliman, none whatsoever. There's no tension at all. Marneus is his faithful, loyal son, and that's just the way it is. And that's probably the way it's going to be. Between Ahriman and Magnus, there's all sorts of tensions. And still this dynamism. Although they are reunited as a legion, there's still these philosophical and ideological tensions. So Ahriman is still pursuing his own agenda, often in contrast to what Magnus is pursuing. Typhus does not like Mortarion, and Mortarion doesn't dislike Typhus, he's just a little frustrated with him. Typhus does not like Mortarion, but what I like is the dynamic between them. Typhus is like the prodigal son. He's the son that's rebelling against his father a little bit. And there is this point in the Death Guard Codex where it points out that Mortarion recognizes in Typhus the same tensions that existed between him and the Emperor. Okay. But he is not going to make the same mistakes with Typhus. So he lets him have a free rein. He lets him go off on his own little crusades. He lets him, take his plague company out and do what he wants across the universe, just so long as he answers the call when Mortarion calls him back.
That's really interesting. The amount of layers that are currently working in 40k, the character development and the character interactions and even the character relationships, it's not as it was, which was this person feels this way towards that person, that A feels this way towards B, and it's reflected in the rules. It's almost like drama, isn't it?
There's way more tension now. It's way more dynamic. It's like the relationship of Eldrad Ulthran to Ulthwé.
Yeah.
There was a time when he was Ulthwé. I mean, that's what his name means. That's what his name actually means. He is the savior of Ulthwé. That's what his name means. But he is not part of Ulthwé anymore. He's actually been cast out because of his necromantic dealings, with his grave robbing from the Domes of Crystal Seers on other craft worlds, and also his part in the destruction of Biel-Tarn. He played a big role in orchestrating that. And the Farseers of Ulthwé, who were before fanatically loyal to him, that was the last straw. That was the last straw with him. They cast him out. So now Ulthwé is broken in half. You've got one side of the culture still following Eldrad Ulthron, and their forces are nomadic now. They're consigned to the Webway. That's how they travel now. Whereas the other half is your more classic Ulthwé force, which is still operating from the craft world.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. That's absolutely fascinating. I never thought I would ever see that. I never thought I would see Eldrad leave Ulthwé.
And not only has he left, he's gone off and done quite insane things from certain points of view.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the Inari would not have come about were it not for him. No. He orchestrated that. He orchestrated the coming of the Inari and the sort of stirring of Inead, and the creation of the avatar of Inead.
Mm-hmm.
Which may or may not be a good thing for the Eldar. It remains to be seen. But yes, that's basically my saga of the last month or so, and I'm just surprised I got anything in, to be honest. It's certainly that much, considering how busy it's been. But what have you been up to?
Well, myself, for those of you who've been paying attention this year, there hasn't been a huge amount that's been going on. I've kind of made up for it. To start off with, I'm going to do something which is going to be Adam's, I don't know how to call it, Adam's weekly deal, or Adam's monthly deal, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Basically, I appear to have gained the luck of the devil in finding old codexes. Part of my project at the moment is that I'm trying to build up a history. I want a giant archive of everything, Codex and history and fluff, dating right back to the beginning.
Oh, that's a brilliant idea.
It's good. I mean, I've got White Dwarfs from issue... Where am I at now? 84.
It's good going. That's right. Really good going. I mean, is that the point? Is it at that point? Are they just focused on Games Workshop products, or is that the point where they're doing other game systems as well? Because I know that in the earliest days they used to do D&D. They used to do loads of different game systems.
Their first issue, I think off the top of my head, I'd have to double check. The first issue, which is purely Games Workshop, is 97, I think.
Right. So, you've got them covering other stuff at that point. That's great.
Yeah, I've got big gaps in the collection that I need to fill in, but the idea is that I'm trying to get every White Dwarf from the beginning as best I can.
God.
It's going to be a long-term project.
It's going to be difficult, that is. I mean, especially getting some of the early ones in a good condition.
Yeah. I mean, the condition I'm not too fussed about. As long as it's legible, I'm happy.
I'll be honest. I mean, I bought a couple of old ones recently, and I kind of like them to be a bit thumbed and a bit tattered, Yeah,
it shows the love.
It does. It really does. I particularly like it when in the old ones that the mail order thing at the back is filled in and no one sent it.
Yes, I am exactly with you on that one. I know the joy of, I can see what you were going to buy.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, what I think, because I used to do that as a kid, and of course you just never had the money for it, so you'd never send it off. So that's what I'm thinking. This is a kid who desperately wanted this miniature or to start this miniature, but just never quite got the money for it.
Mm-hmm. Out of interest, did you ever just ring up the mail order trolls just to ask questions?
I did. I used to phone them because I was very confused about how it worked when I was a kid. This was pre-internet, obviously, so you had to mail order or write everything down. I was very confused about how it worked. So I would ask them things like, so can you just buy limbs? Can you just buy bits? Could I buy like the bits to make this conversion that I saw in the magazine? Would you be able to tell me what bits they were? And you know what? They would.
Yeah.
They were actually quite knowledgeable. They weren't just people who worked in like the factory. They would have to be trained in what was in the most recent White Dwarf in case people like me phoned up, who they probably hated.
One of the weirdest experiences I had with phoning a mail order troll was he asked, so whereabouts are you based? I said, yeah, in Cumbria. Oh, all right, whereabouts? Seaton. So he went, hang on, what? Whereabouts in Seaton? I said, down close. And he just went, up until 6 years ago, I lived on Derwent Avenue. I said, what? Hang on.
So a local troll.
Yeah, he was a troll that went off to the big city. It was
Brilliance, absolute brilliance. I mean, of course, the internet has completely revolutionized that entire system. I mean, I imagine the vast majority of their business is via the internet now.
I would say so, yeah. I do kind of miss the days of being able to thumb through the old White Dwarfs.
I do too. I used to. I know. I'm sure you used to do exactly the same thing. But I used to the catalog parts at the back of every White Dwarf.
Yes.
I used to obsess over them.
Oh yeah, I'm still doing it now over issues that are like 30 years old.
Yeah.
Me and Abby we've created a game called Warhammer, and it's the idea that. I pick up a couple of these issues, and she just looks in the catalogue section, and she goes through each page, and she says whether or not I wanted that miniature, bought that miniature, disliked that miniature, or never wanted to touch that miniature. And 9 times out of 10, she's got it right.
Yeah, so she knows your tastes rather well.
Oh, yeah. It's no, I don't think you'd like that. Well, no, it's high elf. Why would I like that? You probably think it's a little bit weak looking and it's like, yeah, it is. It's a little Lord of the Ringsy, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, yeah. That's kind of a benchmark for me too. I don't really like the ones that look a little too Middle Earth.
No. And high elves were so Middle Earth it hurts.
Oh, they God, yeah. They must be the ones that derived, torn from the pages, direct from the pages of The Hobbit and the Silmarillion, than any other force. Any other.
But, anyhow,
yes.
What I was saying was I'm building this thing. So I've managed to do pretty well. It's I've got quite a lot of so I've got the complete run of all the Vampire Counts books now.
Oh, that's an interesting evolution.
Mm-hmm. It's really, I mean, it's part of why I want to do this, is so I can watch the evolution of the characters and of the armies and how it all takes place, as well as the evolution of the game.
Yeah. I mean, have you got the original Warhammer Armies Undead book?
Yes.
I mean, that's the one where it really kicks off, isn't it, for the Undead? Because that's where you've got Nagash coming about and whatnot. But I love that book. I love that book because that was released just before I got into the hobby, just before, and I love how polyglot it is. You know, you've got liches and mummies and zombies and vampires and golems and werewolves all together. Yep. All together in one army list. I think it's really cool.
It is. It's a really fascinating thing to look at. And as I say, through the evolution of it's mind-bogglingly beautiful.
But from the undead, I mean, when the undead became the vampire counts, that was a massive sea change.
Yes.
I remember that. I remember it, and I was a little bit put out by it as a kid. You know, as you are when you're a kid, when something changes like that. I was a little bit put out for it initially until I started reading about the extended background of the bloodlines and the Necrarch and the Lamia, and actually I really loved them. I really loved, particularly the Necrarch. The Necrarch just do it for me in a million and one ways. You know, the fact that they are these obsessive lunatic sorcerers who live in towers and don't really come out very much, don't get much moonlight, you know, and they rot as they work. They kind of degenerate into these hideous shambling corpses. I think it's fantastic. I love it. Again, it's, as you were saying before, it's Nurgle. It's the influence of Nurgle.
It's because you mentioned him. God damn it.
It never touches me. It comes down the line and touches you, doesn't it? I have the Death Guard Codex here. I'm touching it right now. So presumably your cold will get a million times worse as a result.
I would love to see the TV series Touched by a Nurgle.
Ew. It would be unpleasant, wouldn't it? It'd be graphically very unpleasant.
But yesterday, I was in a charity shop. I was just walking past and I saw there was a coat, and I thought, "Ooh, I know somebody would like that coat." So I thought I'd go in and see it. and see if it was worth getting. It was not. It was too small.
Yeah.
However, what I found in there was a collection of books.
Mm-hmm.
I found 7th edition Codex Space Marines. 7th edition Codex Adeptus Mechanicus. I found 7th edition Codex Orcs. Yeah. That's
great.
This is for the evolution.
Yeah. I mean, actually, that is going to make it fascinating. So you're going to be able to chart the dips and the heights of the armies.
Oh yeah. There's going to be articles coming out the Wahoo next year once I've managed to get a decent collection of these going. I want to once I've got a complete run of something, I want to try and get some articles written on it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So I went over and I said, "How much are these?" And she said, £3, please. And I thought, all right, okay, so right, £3 each. Here's a tenner. And then she gave me £8 change. And I went, "That's only £2." And she went, "Oh, sorry about that. £2 will do."
Brilliant. Absolutely. Right. Well, clearly not knowing how much those books sell for.
Yeah. I felt a little guilty, I'm going to not lie. But on the other hand, can't catch me.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you say 7th edition Space Marines, which one?
That's a good point, actually. One sec.
Is it the first one or the second one? Because they had two during that game system.
Second, it's the Matt Ward one.
Is it the one that has the Decurion that gives you free transports?
It is, yes.
Yeah, so it's the latest, it's the latter day one, the one that everybody hated.
Yeah, it's the one that's just obsessed with Ultramarines and you can't get away from them.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I even think it points out in some of the background that all the other chapters aspire to be like the Ultramarines.
Yeah,
oh, fuck off.
Yeah,
the Space Wolves do not aspire to be like the Ultramarines. They just don't. The Dark Angels definitely don't aspire to be like the Ultramarines.
No. I mean, I just quickly picked up the Space Wolves book that I got a couple of weeks back.
Uh-huh.
And it's a world of difference between that and this.
Mm-hmm.
A literal world of difference. That Codex Space Marines is awful.
It's obscene, isn't it? I mean, there's too many win buttons.
Yes.
That's the problem. I mean, from an army, from a pure crunch perspective, it's too open to abuse. It's way, way, way too open to abuse. The stuff you can do with that codex, you could do with that codex, is at least equivalent to some of the worst excesses of that 3.5 Chaos Space Marine codex.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Some of the formations you can throw together and the benefits that they provide the army are obscene.
Yeah.
Obscene.
But on the plus side, though, those days
are longer. They're longer.
So, on a modelling standpoint, I've been working on some Zench.
Yay!
Because
it seems to be a running theme.
Zeech has become my spirit animal.
Me too. You know, I've got a funny feeling my parents have got me Magnus the Red for Christmas.
Oh, nice.
I think they have. My mum was dropping hints about something recently. She said, "Oh, I ordered it for you. It's very big. It's bigger than I thought it was. He's got wings." I was like, "Yeah, I think I know who that is."
This is where you find out you've actually got like a knockoff Lord of Change.
Oh yeah, that would be yeah. Or that Forge World one, which I actually really don't like.
Yeah, that's...
I don't know why. I really, really don't like that model.
It doesn't seem to have any dynamicism to it. It's very... I don't know.
It's kind of dull, isn't it? I like the Slanesh one. The Keeper of Secrets, I think, is gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
But the Bloodthirster as well, Kabanda, I like him.
Yeah.
But I do not like the Lord of Change. The wings, for some reason, don't do it for me. You know, they look more like the wings of a dove.
Yeah, I can see that.
Than the wings of an eagle or of a bird of prey, and that doesn't fit Zeech for me.
I quite like the idea of Zeech's predatory doves.
Although, you know, there was a beautiful Lord of Change conversion featured years and years ago. You've probably seen it in one of your White Dwarfs, in one of the Golden Demons, and someone had converted a Lord of Change to give it butterfly wings.
Yes, I remember that thing.
Gorgeous.
Oh, yeah.
Loads of work.
Yeah.
Loads of work involved in that. Beautiful.
That's one of the cool things about going back through these old white dwarfs. And what I think I might do next year, as we go along, is I might every episode just grab a random issue, and we'll talk about it.
I think that's a great idea because odds on I'll probably remember the article. I'm just obsessed about them so much.
Yeah, that's the fun part. So, allow me to take you to the city of Anamina. The city of Anamina is my Zench cult-held city. It is entirely built around the idea of prospects.
Okay.
People come to Anamina and they say, I need to change my fate. I'm poor. I'm starving. I need to become richer. And then the great sorcerer in the middle, who doesn't call himself the great sorcerer, obviously. He is the hand of the changer of ways, because he wants to help you change your ways.
Oh, so the hand. That's a nice... I like that. That's a kind of cool title.
And people bring him something, something physical to start with. And they say to him, please help me change my ways. Please help me become more than I am, or become better than I am, or even become other than I am. And he will take your small gift and he will say, come back in 3 days. This great hooded figure that sits in the centre of his big dale. And then they will come back in a few days and he will say, at the end of the week, your life will change. But it was harder than I thought it would be, so we need more payment. And the guy will say, I have nothing. I have nothing. You have taken the physical thing that I've brought in. He says, no. There is nothing physical that I need from you. And he'll take that little tiny element of the soul, that little bit that helps you be you, and no longer just a puppet dancing on the strings of an elder god. And that is the payment. And that is the basis of this idea, that the hand of the changer of ways is to be honest with you, what I've built is a mind flayer.
Yeah.
I didn't mean it to be a mind flayer.
But it is a mind flayer, essentially.
It's a mind flayer.
It'd be nice to model him like that.
Oh, well, that's the thing. As I was working on him, it's like, you know what would look really good? A little bit of bat wings coming out the side. Oh, I'm going to put some armour on his arms, his shoulders. And then I had a giant seal feeder tendril head.
Oh, like the Imgal steelers with their face tendrils.
And I thought, I imagine that with a hood over the top, so I sculpted the hood.
It's a mind flayer.
Yeah,
or
and then I realised
which is an independent mind flayer.
So yeah, it's one of those things. It happened. But then I started going through and modelling loads of different stuff. Like I've had a Magister for a while, but I've never really liked the Magister model. Oh,
the Magister is the bent, the sort of avian-footed, bent over gaunt sorcerer model, yeah.
Yeah. And so I was thinking about it, and I thought, well, part of what I'm doing here is that the cultists, they are changing their ways. They are becoming Zangors. It's how the Anamina is building its Zangor force, is that the people are all... One of the things I've come up with is the idea that all the weapons that the army uses is grown from crystals. And the crystals are poking through parts of the city from Zench's fortress.
Oh, so it's part of the crystal labyrinth, yeah? Right.
It's not a big part, obviously. It's nothing important, but it's just
an extrusion.
Yeah. So these crystals are broken up and they are shaped into weapons, and then they are given to the acolytes. And then, because they are from the labyrinth, they slowly transform these acolytes into different things. Mostly, it turns them into Zangors. So in my army, my acolytes, some of them have like Zangor arms, or one of them has a Zangor head that's just bursting out of the chest piece. One of them has just an actual Zangor head, and he's just sitting there looking confused at his hands. And I've been building that idea up because I've realised
Mm.
that I don't think I'm going to go for any demons.
No demons. That's
No.
interesting. I mean, they're a big part of the disciples of Zeech army, so that's really kind of an interesting way of characterizing the Force.
Mm-hmm. And as you said before, I want to tell a story, and I want to be able to tell a story through how the army moves.
Mm-hmm.
So at the front, you're going to have the acolytes. Then behind the acolytes, you're going to have a secondary base of acolytes who are going to be much further down the line.
Right.
And then they will be surrounded and flanked by the Zangors. Mm-hmm. And some of the Zangors are going to have little human elements to them, but not huge amounts. You know, they are fully Zangor, or they're almost fully Zangor. Another thing that I'm doing is, because there's crystals breaking through from the labyrinth, there's going to be a high collection of familiars, which allows me to do something I never got to do as a kid, which is buy up all of those old Hammer familiars.
Oh God, like the Walking Book and the fish and all of that stuff. Yeah, that's so cool.
So I've been getting as much of them as I can.
Which are probably all lead, aren't they?
Oh yeah. Not a single one's been white metal. They've all been lead.
All lead. Wow, so cool.
Mm-hmm. So I've been building that up. At the moment, my plan is to try and do a Chaos Lord, who is going to be the Blind Fate. So the idea that it's going to be a guy who is he has become Zangor, but he hasn't become tribalistic. Yeah.
So he has a little bit more of himself left.
And I like the idea that he is like a fallen prince, a noble, a guy who, in sort of the background of my head, that he isn't very old. He's only about 20 or so.
Mm-hmm.
And his excesses are the thing that allowed his family city to be taken over by the cult.
Right. So he's one of the original rulers or inhabitants of the city. Oh, I like that. That's kind of cool.
And what I'm going to do, and I don't know if I should tell people just in case I play them, but what I'm going to do is, have you ever seen what a Chaos Lord is like for a Zangor, for a Zench army?
No, I haven't ever seen one actually play, because I've only ever played with these each specific characters, like Magisters and things.
They're not very good.
No. Can't imagine they would be.
So what I've got here is a really elaborate base, where I've got a familiar, which is a night goblin body with a acolyte moon face.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever read any of the new Crobazon books?
I haven't, no.
Okay. There's a thing in the new Crobazon books called a handlinger, which is, it's basically a human hand with a long prehensile tail.
Nice.
It's got a single eye on the back of its the hand, and it gets its fingers around your heart.
Ooh.
And it controls you.
Oh, that's kind of cool. I like that.
Mm-hmm. So I've sculpted one of them. I've got a little familiar that's holding a sword and staring out. And they've got this almost like a bridge coming up, and all these rocks and skulls and everything. And I've gone up my way to make it look incredibly ornate.
Mm-hmm. As Zeech champions always are. I mean, it's fun, isn't it? That like they've always been described that way, but it's only recently that the miniature sculpting and designing techniques have allowed for that.
Yeah.
You know?
And so my plan is for Blind Fates, the good old Hamasan. He's going to be running out in front of everybody with his youthful exuberance, and then hopefully people will aim for him and try and stop him, because he's got this big elaborate base, so that must be something really important, and he looks like a Chaos Lord. Right, so we need to take him out now. Whilst in the background, I'm going to have the hand of the Changer of Ways just sit there. Yes. Because I'm going to be using Gaunt Summoner rules for him, just hammering the shit out of everything from a distance.
Gaunt Summoners are much better in a Zeech force than a Chaos Lord is, because they've got all of these synergies with the other units, and they're also just magically insane.
Yeah.
You know, as you'd expect.
So what I'm basically saying is, my army lies to you.
Yes. That's very Zeech, isn't it?
Yes.
It's very Zeech. And as you've also got for your mechanic of characters becoming Zangor, there are actually spells and items and formations in Battle Scrolls, rather, that do that. that actually allow for that. So that is fantastic. You know, you can actually do that. You can represent your force really beautifully on the battlefield.
Mm-hmm. That's the idea. As you said before, I want to tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't actually explain the Magister. So I got a Magister, and I looked at it, and I just didn't like it.
Mm.
You know, I quite like the dynamic pose it's in, but I just wasn't a fan.
No,
so I was looking at what I had, and so I just stuck an Urgle helmet on with the single horn coming out the side,
mm-hmm.
and then I thought, hang on, I've got some branch witch horns, so I attached the branch witch horns to the back, then I gave it a long ponytail, and now it's got this really wild look to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought to myself, right, so he's going to play as a Magister, but what am I going to do with him? And I come up with the idea that this could possibly be either the prince's father
mm-hmm.
or the prince's son.
Right.
It's one of the two, and I'm going to have the two of them together.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. So you've got this, I mean, you could expand that theme, really, couldn't you? You could have, like, various different members of the family.
Exactly.
Turning up in different guises. It's kind of cool.
And so what I might do is I might have a collection of characters together, maybe using, like, the Magister rules a couple of times or something. Mm-hmm. I don't know how I'll do it yet. But I quite like the idea of the royal family, for want of a better term, just running around by themselves at the front of an army, scaring the hell out of people, going, what is that? Why are they like that? Whilst power behind the throne is just sitting at the back of the army, giving out the buffs and amounts of dangerous spells. Yeah,
that sounds really fun. Really fun. And I love the fact you can do it.
Yeah.
You can not, you know, it's not just an aesthetic thing either. You know, you can actually, the background and the aesthetics that you've designed for your army actually will inform the way it plays and the way it operates. It's brilliant.
That's the thing. It's a far cry from how it used to be in Warhammer Fantasy Battle.
Yeah.
Where you would have an army. And you could theme an army, I remember.
Oh, yeah, there were loads of themed armies back in the day. I mean, but they didn't play in a themed way.
Exactly. I remember Stu, Dark Ages, he talking about he had a entirely mounted goblin force.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that he had was that it was an entirely mounted carnival that was running around almost like a circus. And because everything was all packed up, the entire army had to be on wolfback, boarback, and on chariots. But he was carrying around like a travelling circus with him. And it's an idea that I really like, and I would love to try and redo. So,
yeah, that'd be so cool. I mean, you can do that with lots of different armies. I mean, Nurgle forces would be great. You could have, like, the cavalcade, you know, the carnival of pestilence. I love the fact that they've designed the army books recently for both game systems that you can actually do that. You can tailor your force in very significant ways, and one specific army list gives you enough range and breadth to create something totally different from other armies created with the same army list. I think that's really cool. But I do recall, like, lots of specifically tailored or converted armies featuring in White Dwarf. Like, I remember there was ages and ages and ages back, there was an undead high elf.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was really good. Every tiny little miniature had been painstakingly converted to make it look like this was not a human undead army, but was actually formed from undead high elves. Very clever stuff. Very, very clever stuff. You get a lot of it nowadays as well. If you in the Blanchett articles in White Dwarf. I mean, for me, those armies are the aesthetic for these game systems. They have that real grimness and elaboration that I love. And they're all so interesting. They've all got really interesting backgrounds. I remember I think it was last year sometime, there was it was an Adeptus Mechanicus force, but it was actually an Adeptus Biologicus force. So everything was wooden and plant-based. Just brilliant. Just a brilliant concept. And it was beautiful. it worked so well. Grim as all hell, but beautiful and absolutely brilliant. Anything that features like a really weird, bizarre inquisitorial or ecclesiarchy cult, I'm just in there, man. I love it. I love what those armies are like, and that really unclean painting style. I love that. I love it. I think it's very difficult to pull off.
Yes.
To pull off effectively, but it gives this wonderful painterly feel. It makes everything feel exaggerated, like a John Blanche painting.
It almost gives it a sense of dreamlike unreality, which is one that I thoroughly enjoy. And as much as I wish that I had a very clean, nice, simple painting style, I can't help myself. I have to go for Blanchett too.
Yeah, I love it too. I mean, don't get me wrong. I really do appreciate those miniatures that someone has the steadiest hand imaginable, where they've painted the most elaborate details and created the most amazing effects. I have enormous time for that. I think it's just stunning. But for my aesthetics and for these universes, generally speaking, I prefer the grittier and the grimier. I really do. I mean, it depends on the army as well, of course. I mean, the finer detail works better on, say, the Eldari or the Elves or whatever. Whereas Nurgle miniatures, as beautiful as the clean paint schemes can be, I really hate seeing them on Nurgle miniatures.
Wash after wash after wash to give that oily,
absolutely, like
pest.
Stippling and unclean dry brushing over not quite dry base coats, lots of ink washes. I love that. I love to see that on Nurgle miniatures, and when it's done well, I actually think they are the best looking Nurgle miniatures out there. I really, really do.
So I think we're going to call it there, because I've realised that we've passed the hour quite dramatically.
No worries, no worries at all.
Enjoyed sort of getting caught up with us and what we've been up to. As I've said a couple of times, I know that things have been kind of weird and not running as they should have been for the last couple of months, and that's purely just down to how my life changed very dramatically, and I'm working odd shifts. And it's just one of those things.
It's absolutely fine. In fact, I really like this format. I must say, I like the freeform nature of it.
So the plan going forward is I do want to try and get the guests back on again. Have people come in to talk about the things that they did, but I think they're going to be scattered. So it'll be a lot of freeform between me and George, and then get somebody in as well, and that's good.
That sounds great to me. I mean, the Games Workshop are throwing so much at us right now. There's always going to be stuff to talk about.
Yes, there is. I mean, one of the things I wanted to really talk about before the end of the year was Necromunda, because I do feel that Necromunda has been New Games Workshop's first big misstep. My apologies for everyone listening at home. I have an absolute arsehole of a cat that throughout this entire show he has done everything in his power to disrupt, and at this point I've given up. So, with all that being said, George, where can people find you?
You can find me at the website strangeplaygrounds.com, where you can find articles and reviews and stuff about my fiction and project. And you can also find me at Twitter at Enigmatic Elegy, and also on the YouTube channel Exaggerated Elegy.
Excellent stuff. You can find me at YouTube as Grublock. You can find me on Twitter as Grublock. And you will not believe it, but Gimli, now that we are closing up, has decided to leave the room. Going to fire that cat out of a cannon.
Of course.
Anyhow, so you can find me on YouTube at Grublock. You can find me on Twitter at Grublock. You can find these shows at thefluffenhammer.weebly.com, and you can find them on theoldoilhouse.co.uk. You can find us on Libsyn. I think that's everything. If you would like to take part in the Fluffies, please pay attention below in the comments and throw in your answers. And when we come back in the new year, we shall be super shiny, ready, and new. So with all that being said, have a Merry Christmas, George.
Oh, thank you so much. I intend to. And by merry, I mean camped out on my parents' sofa with a very large bottle of port.
Nice. See, I've got a bottle of rum. I know I've got a bottle of rum. I can sense it.
Superb.
Nice
Superb.
heavy bottle of Kraken. Yeah.
Sounds good.
So, Merry Christmas, George. Merry Christmas to you out there in internet land. And most of all, Merry Christmas, Nagash. Merry Christmas.
Bye-bye.
'Twere the night afore Xmas, and down by the drops, not one git was stirring, not even the grots. Oak leggings was hung by the dung fires with care, in the hope that McNicholas would soon be there. The big lads was snoring, dreaming of bits and visions of fighting what dazzled their wits. While them boys was sleeping, I sat in me truck, thinking of fights in which to get stuck. Then I felt some urges from me squig beard, I reckon. The drops was calling, I heeded their beckon. Straight to the stink pit I dashed for a slash, and let rip over the edge, while still looking flash. And down went me tinkle, as tinkles must go, and joined the great puddle what glistened below. Then right for my peepers, what else should turn up but 8 stinking gits on a whopper big truck, with a proper big driver, so killy, so slick, I knew in that moment it must be McNick. More faster than red painted Dakar they came, and he swore and snarled, and he called 'em by name. Now Slasher, now Bleeder, now Git Face and Sixskin, on Grommet, on Stupid, on Slag Off and Arsewind, right through the drops to the top of the wall, but do it real sneaky, and don't scratch me car. As homies what fight the big lads do split, when choppers swung proper, score a clean hit, to the dark of the drops they buggered right off, with a truck full of Dakar, McNicholas and grots. Then, while still tinkling, I heard in the dark, those sneaky flash gits was having a laugh. I zipped up me kicks and was thinking real hard, when McNicholas himself strode right through the yard, dressed all in flash bits from his head to his foot, his gubbins all shiny and hurty to look. A bundle of good bits he had on his back, all shooters and choppers and good things like that. His teeth, oh, so snaggled, his chopper, so killy, his guns were right massive, and so was his belly. His big snarly grin was smiling right wide as he told me to zog off, or he'd have me hide. A stubby cigar was wedged in his teeth, and he belched out the smoke with dassy relief. He was much bigger even than our own big boss. Oh, forget I said that, right? Memory loss. But still he was vast, a proper big lad. I ducked to hide from the Dakar he had. With a snarl of his nose and a flash of his gubbins, he strode suddenly off like he ain't seen nothing. I watched real sneaky as he went to his work and poured bits in the leggings of every green Burke till his sack was empty, and then he shrugged and said, "Rest of these gits can go and get zugged." He slumped to his truck to his gits threatened violence, then burned off right fast and left only silence. But I heard him shout out one last thundering cough. "Merry Xmas to all, 'cept you buggered off."